If you look at a map of India today, you might notice something odd. Close to the Himalayas, there lies a strange jut of land that extends awkwardly to its northeast. If you took a step back, you'd be forgiven for thinking it looks a bit like a chicken's neck. These are India's vulnerable northeastern territories, and in these Himalayan borderlands, China and India are preparing to do battle for the fate of South Asia. Welcome to Dualo Media's open source project. I'm your host Simply Nav, and today I'll be explaining why China is eyeing India's northeast, and how taking control of these territories could allow China to dominate South Asia. Northeast India, or the Northeastern region as it is officially known, comprises 8 Indian states. These states are Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura, and Sikkim. These states are connected to the rest of India by a narrow strip of land in the state of West Bengal, called the Siliguri Corridor. This narrow strip of land is only about 22 kilometers wide, making it shorter in width than the standard marathon. The region is bordered to the west by Nepal, to the southwest by Bangladesh, to the east by Myanmar, and to the north by Bhutan and China. 99% of the region's territory borders a foreign country. This makes it naturally vulnerable and very exposed. Many of our modern borders make very little sense. Just take this border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, for example. And India's border, like many of the other weird borders out there, has a story. This story, of course, begins with the partition of India. In the aftermath of World War II, Great Britain, by then already in the process of dismantling its overseas empire, had to figure out what it would do about what was then called the British Raj. This was the crown jewel of the empire, and at its height encompassed territories in what is now India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka. At times, British possessions in the Middle East were also governed from the Raj. The decolonization of South Asia occurred primarily along religious lines. The British began by separating Myanmar and Ceylon, 2 Buddhist majority regions, from the British Raj. These eventually became what are now the Republic of Sri Lanka and the Republic of the Union of Myanmar. After this, British India was divided between a state that encompassed those areas where Hindus were the majority, called the Dominion of India, and a state where Muslims were the majority, called the Dominion of Pakistan. Needless to say, this division of a huge country along sectarian lines did not go very well. In the bloody aftermath of the partition of India, 2 states with awkward borders emerged, and almost immediately, violence erupted between the 2 nations. One such confrontation erupted in 1971, when East Pakistan won independence from West Pakistan in a revolution supported by India, giving birth to a new nation, Bangladesh. In 1975, Sikkim acceded to the Union of India, after a coup overthrew the Chogyal dynasty, and the kingdom voted to abolish the monarchy and join India as a state. And so, by 1975, India secured its connection to what are popularly referred to as the 7 sister states of the Northeast, or the land of the 7 sisters. This region is noteworthy for more than just its awkward geography. It sits in the eastern Himalayas and is dominated by mountains and rainforests, has a subtropical climate with hot, humid summers, severe monsoons, and mild winters. Northeastern India has a population of over 50 million, making it slightly less populous than South Korea at 51 million people, but more populous than all of Kenya at 47 million. But in a country of over 1.3 billion people, this region makes up less than 4% of India's total population. Over 2/3 of the region's population lives in just one state, Assam, with the largest city, Guwahati, coming in at just under 1 million people. The people here speak over 220 different languages, grouped into major families such as Indo-European and Sino-Tibetan languages. The Land of 7 Sisters has as many ethnic groups as it has languages, with the Boro, an ethno-linguistic group from Assam, forming the largest at around 1.5 million people. Northeast India is also very religiously diverse, with Hindus forming over half the population, followed by Muslims at 25% and Christians at 17%. Interestingly, Christianity is the majority religion in 4 of the 8 northeastern states. The GDP of northeastern India comes in at $77 billion US. This gives it an economy roughly the size of Bulgaria. This works out to a GDP per capita of around $1,500 US, and makes the region about as economically developed as Venezuela. In short then, this region came to India in the bloody aftermath of partition, is extremely diverse, both ethnically, linguistically, and religiously, and it's very underdeveloped. This adds up to an exposed territory that is uniquely vulnerable to the predations of any neighbouring would-be great powers. Enter China. The disputes between India and China, along their 3,379 kilometre border, are among the longest and most complex border disputes in the world. For India, the McMahon Line, settled between Tibet and British India at the 1914 Simla Convention, is the national boundary between India and China. The Republic of China was not a party to this agreement, and the now People's Republic of China contends that as Tibet was not a sovereign state, it did not have the right to make this agreement. Instead, it considers some 65,000 square kilometres south of the line as part of the Tibet Autonomous Region, known as Southern Tibet. The line of actual control, or the current border of India and China, is largely a reflection of the McMahon Line. But China today is looking to press its claims to what it sees as a legitimate border, and claim territory now held by India and Bhutan, thereby overturning the status quo. In October 1962, war erupted between China and India over this border. China's three major motivations for the war were to first punish India for military occupation of territories it considered its own, second, to punish India for perceived subversion in Tibet, and third, prevent a Soviet-Indian encirclement of China. This war took place in the broader context of the Sino-Soviet split, when China and the Soviet Union were jostling for leadership over international communism. This also explains why the Soviets backed India over China, a communist nation, and why India gravitated towards the Soviets when the US and UK refused to provide military support. The war took India and its then Prime Minister Nehru completely off guard. India was confident war would not be triggered, and made little preparations for such a contingency. China's military plan called for a main assault in the eastern sector, launched at the same time as a smaller assault in the western sector in Aksai Chin. Indian troops in the eastern sector were to be expelled, and China would then announce a unilateral ceasefire and withdraw, followed by negotiations from a position of strength. Why Mao's China planned to withdraw from the onset is something of a mystery, but it is suspected that a big part of it was that the dispute was relatively insignificant for China when compared with its conflict with the Soviet Union, and it didn't want to overreach when it was already going to be viewed as the aggressor in the conflict. The war was a disaster militarily for India. Of the 22,000 troops it had in theatre, by its own estimates, there were 1,300 killed, 1,600 missing, 1,000 wounded, and nearly 4,000 captured. Meanwhile, for the Chinese, between 700 and 1,300 PLA soldiers were killed, of a deployed force of 80,000 troops. Despite the one-sided losses militarily, the territorial losses were not nearly as grim for India, given the Chinese withdrawal. The aftermath for the war was a hardening of the disputed border along the line of actual control, and the shattering of Nehru's hope for a Chinese-Indian axis to counteract the two Cold War blocs. India's poor performance in the war led it to double down on its army, and develop the infrastructure, training and logistics necessary to project force into the mountainous regions of northeastern India. In short then, India got lucky and learned a hard lesson. Flash forward almost 60 years and this disputed region is no longer a sideshow. The Soviet Union has long since fallen, but China has grown far stronger than it was during the 1962 Sino-Indian War. Locked in a global confrontation with the United States, China is now looking to secure its place as top dog in Asia, and views India as a long-term threat. In what is a rather ironic turn of events, just as the US is looking to contain China, much to China's cries of imperialism, China is trying to do the exact same thing to India. There are three theatres where China is looking to press its advantage. In the Indian Ocean, China has forged close ties with many of India's neighbours, looking to create a maritime Silk Road that allows it to protect its vulnerable sea lines of communication to all suppliers in the Middle East, resources in Africa, and consumers in Europe. This has included building dual-use infrastructure such as ports and airstrips that may one day pave the way for a Chinese military presence in the Indian Ocean. China's first true overseas military base in Djibouti, ostensibly built for anti-piracy operations, speaks to China's growing ambitions for its blue water navy. Collectively, these bases and partnerships are what are referred to as China's string of pearls, and they encroach upon what India has traditionally considered its sphere of influence. To India's west, China has developed a very close relationship with Pakistan. Indeed, though China can count very few nations as genuine allies, I would include Pakistan on this list. Cooperation between the two nations is comprehensive, and an example of just how deep these ties are is shown in Pakistan ceding parts of its territories in the Kashmir disputed region, including Aksai Chin, the Trans-Karakoram Tract, and part of the Demchok sector to China. Chinese support to Pakistan has included the sale of weapons, loans, and infrastructure spending, as well as prime position within China's Belt and Road Initiative. Finally, in the northeast, China has been ramping up infrastructure building along the line of actual control, looking to reinforce its presence and pressure India along its exposed chicken neck. PLA troops have routinely crossed the line and looked to construct roads, outposts, and other facilities similar in objective to those it constructed in the South China Sea. Bhutan, a small landlocked Himalayan kingdom that has close relations with India, has been subject to many such incursions. China has made claims to large tracts of land in Bhutan, but what it is really after is a Doklam Plateau. This plateau sits at the juncture of the three nations, and China has been leaning heavily on Bhutan with an eye on the broader dispute with India. Controlling key features like the Jemperi Ridge on the plateau would greatly improve China's ability to threaten India's vulnerable chicken neck. This has been one of the prevailing themes of the India-China border dispute. In this dense, mountainous terrain, the defender has an overwhelming advantage, and though in a straight-out dogfight between India and China, China would likely win. The natural walls provided by the Himalayas have provided India tremendous local advantages. But this advantage only holds as long as China is unable to establish bases and airstrips on the Indian side of the Himalayas. Once that happens, China will be in a position to threaten the Indian heartland in a way that India just does not have the capacity to do with China. The Chumbi Valley in Chinese-controlled Tibet points like a dagger at India's Siliguri corridor, making India's connection to its northeast tenuous at the best of times. Losing the Doklam Plateau as well would put China in an even stronger position from which it could cut off India from its northeastern region. India understands the gravity of this threat, and this is why this corridor and the mountainous border with China is heavily patrolled by India's army. These include mountain warfare divisions, the Assam Rifles, and the Special Operations Outfit known as the Special Frontier Force. This force, comprised primarily of Tibetan refugees living in India, was created with the goal of conducting operations behind enemy lines in the event of another Sino-Indian war. Under the direct supervision of India's intelligence organisation, the Research and Analysis Wing, or RAW, it is technically not a part of the Indian Army, and is heavily involved in border operations. The deployment of more and more Indian troops to the border, and the willingness to confront Chinese incursions, has gone far in deterring China. But all is not well for India. China has found a weak link in India's border defences: Bhutan. The Treaty of Friendship signed between India and Bhutan in 1949 provided that India guide Bhutan on matters of foreign policy and defence. However, despite this close relationship, earlier this year, China and Bhutan signed an MOU, setting out a three-stage roadmap to expedite negotiations on the disputed border, in what is sure to be seen as a huge blow to India. This plays well into China's hands, as it means Bhutan blinked first in the game of chicken. As China has shown before in its poor record of honouring agreements, it is highly likely it will reinforce the gains it had made by expanding infrastructure in the disputed regions. This has included entire settlements that have sprung up in months that serve to bolster China's position in the region. For India, not being directly party to this dispute is problematic, as though it has some latitude to intervene in Bhutan, it is still dealing with an independent nation. How far India is willing to go in fighting Bhutan's battles remains to be seen. For Bhutan, the overmatch is severe, and in a contest of wills, it will need to be patient and firm. Its government may well decide that the Doklam Plateau is a small price to pay if it is to regain the other border territories it has lost to China's stealth invasion, and a chance for the famously reclusive nation to be left alone. This would leave India out in the cold, and may give it no choice but to intervene with force. In the event China does take Doklam, India would be at a great disadvantage in the opening stages of a war with China. China would move to cut off India from its northeastern territories, and could even annex these regions outright. Given China already claims the entire state of Arunachal Pradesh, it wouldn't be surprising to see it gobble up the whole northeast region. This would be an unmitigated disaster for India, as it would lose a significant amount of territory. Bhutan would likely be either absorbed or become a Chinese vassal state, and China would gain a direct border with Bangladesh. Given China has already been heavily damming rivers upstream in the Tibetan Plateau, I have no doubt that this, together with a shared border, would be enough to decisively swing Bangladesh to the Chinese side. India would then risk being caught in a two-front war, fighting China and potentially Bangladesh in the east, and China and Pakistan in the west, without the security previously afforded by the natural walls of the Himalayas. Though even Chinese military experts admit that India has some of the world's most competent mountain warfare divisions, free rein for China to begin building airstrips and other military infrastructure in conquered northeastern India would dramatically shift the balance of power in the area in China's favour. With air cover and clear lines of supply, a Chinese push into Bengal would become much more feasible. In short then, losing the northeast would be a massive loss for India, And that is exactly the danger posed by China's gambit in Doklam. Taken together with China's moves on Aksai Chin and its tacit support for Pakistani claims in Kashmir, it is clear that China is looking to shift the balance of power in South Asia in favour of itself, while containing India with the threat of a two-front war. Faced with such grim prospects, it may well come to pass that India, lagging China in development, will accept a subordinate position if it does not get the necessary support from the international partners. Though it remains unlikely and would require a severe failure in Indian policy, if a nightmare scenario emerged where India lost control of both northeastern India and Jammu and Kashmir, it is quite possible that China could coerce India into submission and make it little more than a vassal state. The risk of terrorist attacks or aerial bombardment of vulnerable cities from the west and east, with no obvious ability to respond conventionally to strike China's homeland, might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. As the United States looks to form a coalition of the willing to confront China's imperial ambitions, India being neutralized as a belligerent would be a significant loss. Even if India didn't join the US in a war with China, the amount of resources China would have to dedicate to keep India on its side of the Himalayas are resources that could otherwise be focused elsewhere. Neutralizing India as a threat would give China greater freedom to project force into the Pacific while securing its vulnerable western flank. To sum up then, I think it is worth keeping a very close eye on what is happening in the Himalayan borderlands between India and China. Though these disputes may seem small and petty to us, they have the potential to determine the fate of South Asia and whether India will join the United States as a regional ally or become a subdued vassal of China. Whether the United States and its partners recognize this is another matter, but without US support, I think it will be very difficult for the slow-moving bureaucratic government in New Delhi to contend with the relentless and aggressive pressure China is exerting in these Himalayan borderlands. That's all from me, folks. If you'd like to see more of these videos about geopolitics and more, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. It helps immensely. This is Simply Nav from Duello Media, signing off.